your prestigious conference. As you have mentioned, the basic concern of my presentation is to investigate if a religion can help us to manage the religious differences in the contemporary world. In this regard, Islam, that is one of the major religious traditions. I will try to investigate how Islamic values and tradition can help us to manage difference in the contemporary period. Growing diversity is a challenging task, but dealing with religious difference is even more demanding nowadays. Therefore, the growing religious diversity in the contemporary world deserves more scholarly attention. Hence, this modest contribution is an effort to understand if a religion can help us to resolve issues related to religious difference. This paper reviews the Islamic doctrine and traditions pertaining to religious accommodation in general and the Ottoman Millet system in particular, to examine if the case offers any valuable insights to scheme religious autonomy in the modern times. The growing global diversity is worrisome. The Global Religious Diversity Index discloses the fact that not less than 1/3 of the population in most of the states belongs to minority religions in the developing world. The estimates suggest profound changes in religious composition of the developed world on account of the contemporary migration flows. It is believed that the minority religions would significantly grow in size in Europe and North America in the coming decades. We have a multiple power sharing model to deal with diversity. For example, federalism is a constitutional design that offers political accommodation of minorities. Similarly, consociationism is another power sharing model. Centrifugalism is also there. But in most part of the world, federal arrangements are seen insufficient to deal with religious diversity, because federal system of governments offer territorial accommodation of minorities in most of the cases. But if we can have a closer look at the religious minorities in different parts of the world, they are mostly geographically dispersed. Therefore, non-territorial autonomy is a more viable solution in comparison to territorial autonomy. Non-territorial autonomy refers to the allocation of autonomy to the groups
I'm sorry to
that
interrupt you.
are geographically dispersed.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yes, we can hear you, but you don't share your slides. We are seeing the first slide. Yes, that's okay.
Okay, actually, it's not working actually. No, it's working actually. Okay.
It's okay now. Yes. Good.
Non-territorial autonomy refers to the allocation of autonomy to the groups that are dispersed among the majority while belonging to certain self-identified notion of group autonomy. It implies the transfers of jurisdiction over the matters pertaining to culture, language, religion, education, and family laws to ethno-national linguistic or religious groups irrespective of their territorial concentration. In this regard, how Islam can help us to devise a workable solution to deal with this diversity? It is believed that generally Islam offers quite generous, Islam appears quite generous and kind towards the religious minorities. The Quran and Sunnah traditions and texts of the Holy Prophet Muhammad primarily are the sources that provided basis for the Islamic law and condition of religious accommodation. The Quran explicitly advocates the accommodation of religious difference, and the most explicit advocacy of this principle is illustrated in the verse 256 of Al-Baqarah, the second surah of Quran. The Quran commands, there is no compulsion in religion. Quran guides the believers to deal with the non-Muslim through justice, tolerance, benevolence. Islam forbids forced conversion and urges religious toleration and forbearance. Everybody has been given the right to adopt a religion or belief of his own choice. Islam disallows coercing people into adopting any religion. It holds the sanctity of worship places of all religions. The protection of worship places has been regarded as the will and pleasure of Allah. Quran also says, Allah does not forbid you to deal justly and kindly with those who fought not against you on account of religion and did not drive you out of your homes. Verily, Allah loves those who deal with equity. These Quranic doctrines were practiced by the Holy Prophet Muhammad and his pious caliphs in true letter and spirit. Shortly after his arrival at Medina, the Holy Prophet negotiated an agreement with the non-Muslims that is widely known as the Charter of Medina. The nascent state of Medina in this covenant granted autonomy to the parties of the agreement. The Charter not only provided authority to the parties of covenant over internal affairs, but also declared that the Jews have their religion and the Muslims have theirs. This negotiated autonomy and accommodation of religious difference brought forth the argument that the state of Medina might be considered a kind of federalist state. This modus operandi partly provided a basis for the scheme of religious tolerance and accommodation exposed in the millet system in the Ottoman Empire. It has been argued that the Holy Prophet's cordial relations with Christians of his time were not attributed to political purposes or personal aspirations, but rather they resulted from his belief that Christians should be able to freely practice their own faith in accordance with their own will. The Holy Prophet and his companions entered into several agreements with the non-Muslims. For example, Charles points out that Holy Prophet signed covenants with Christians to protect and defend peaceful Christian communities, not attack them. The religious accommodation of the non-Muslim continued in the post-prophetic period. The Pact of Umar, as noted by Karen Buckley and George Gavrans, spells out the privileges and burdens of non-Muslim communities living under Muslim rule. The Ottoman Millet system officially recognized three non-Muslim communities, namely the Greek Orthodox, the Armenian Orthodox, and the Jews. It has been argued that the Christians and Jewish communities enjoyed legal autonomy in intra-communal matters under the guidance of their spiritual leaders appointed by the Sultan. The millet system empowered the millet groups to elect their leaders and govern themselves. The millets were organized around the dominant religious institutions with the understanding that religious institutions would define and delimit collective life. This system provided non-territorial autonomy to the religious groups by allowing the Christians and Jewish minorities to administer their own affairs in specific domains, including education, religion, and family matters. It has been referred that the Ottoman millet system was a type of federal theocracy. It has been proclaimed that by means of millet system, the empire not only managed to grant autonomy to the minorities in religious matters, but also provided more general freedom to govern themselves in purely internal matters with their own legal codes and courts. The millet system was so successful in managing diversity that the contemporaries and the rivals of Ottoman Empire practiced its many principles in their own societies. For example, the Russian Empire Muslims were provided autonomy along the lines of Ottoman model. Similarly, in the case of Austro-Hungarian Empire, the national cultural autonomy model has many common features with the Ottoman millet system. The pluralistic approach of the millet system provided opportunities for non-Muslims to preserve, maintain, and express their distinctive cultural forms, lifestyles, and rights. In due course of time, millet system also permitted the incorporation of non-Muslims into the Ottoman administrative, economic, and political system. Nevertheless, the Ottoman millet system has earned criticism as well. It has been reviewed that despite its many advantages and gains for rulers and ruled, the millet system was an imperfect system. Equally, it has been asserted that the model is outdated and its original form is not compatible with the modern democratic societies. Its relevance in the societies is contested on the grounds that it was a non-territorial arrangement suitable for that particular period and that we cannot readily emulate in order to resolve the failure of the modern territorial state. Nevertheless, despite all of its shortcomings, the millet system arguably offers some valuable insights for planning non-territorial arrangements for granting autonomy to religious minorities in the wake of growing religious diversity in modern societies. Finally, the primary contribution of the Islamic tradition in relation to religious tolerance is that it set a benchmark for dealing with religious difference, but by pronouncing that there is no compulsion in religion. It might serve as a guiding principle in both secular and non-secular states for inventing formula and informal modus operandi to manage religious diversity in the contemporary world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation and giving another perspective in non-territorial.
You are muted.
Oh. Thank you very much for your interesting perspective and presentation and giving another view about non-territorial autonomy. Do we have any? This was Mohammed Mushtaq, associate professor in political science and chair at the Department of Political Science and International Relations in University of Gujarat, Pakistan. Now, does anyone have question for our presenter? From the audience? Yes, Professor Ivandowski is here. He wants to ask a question.
I hope you can hear me.
Can you hear him? No?
I hope you can hear me. I was just wondering if you can give us any illustration or your comment as regards the applicability of these NTA arrangements in states with where the majority, with Islamic tradition, and where the majority practices Islam. So how would you have any example which would be useful to consider further along the line of, some adjusted millet system or anything else that could be considered from the countries where Islam is the dominant religion? Thank you.
Please. No.
Actually, theoretically, Islam provides many principles of accommodations. That, as I have mentioned, that these principles were practiced in the early years of Islam and partly in the millet system. But in the contemporary world, I cannot cite any example of a Muslim minority state that is practicing these principles. This is a fact.
Why is this so?
But it does not. Sorry.
Why is this so? If it's so entrenched in the very original tradition of Islam, why is it then not possible to see new contemporary application?
Actually, Islam encouraged to have ijtihad, the solution of the problems, keeping in perspective the situation in the context in which any state or any matter is operating. Unfortunately, as I have mentioned you earlier, that in the contemporary Muslim world, there are some concessions or accommodation for minorities at certain places, but the Islamic principles are not practicing in true spirit, in true letter and spirit.
Thank you.
Nevertheless, these principles offers some insights, some valuable insights to devise such frameworks for secular as well as non-secular settings.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have another question? Yes.
Yes,
And
I
we have
also.
Jakob here.
Yeah, my question, I also thought it was very interesting with this idea of religious tolerance within the Quran and in the Islamic religion. And my question is, how can a state today promote this tolerance? How can this be promoted by a, it's both a secular and a non-secular state, Islamic state. It's of course a question you can talk about an Islamic state, but how can you promote this idea of religious tolerance?
Please.
Sorry?
You couldn't hear it.
Okay, could you hear us? Professor Jakob is asking how you can, the principles that are in Quran about religious tolerance, how you can promote them in today's state, both secular and the religious one. How you can promote them.
The basic guiding principle is that there is no compulsion in religion, so as secular and non-secular state should respect or follow this principle, and in formal or informal ways, the states can follow this principle by not intervening in the matters related to religion.